Hi everyone, it's Rob Watson, the module leader for TECH1502 Introduction to Community Media, and this week is the 9th lecture in our lecture series, and the idea today is to talk about, or this week is to talk about community identity and what that means in terms of our understanding of how community media works, as it is often based around the construction and the development of a sense of identity and what that means in practice. So the kind of things that we're thinking about is the way that we construct a sense of identity based on a number of factors, and that can include the kind of the texts, the media representations, the media artifacts that we encounter and that we share and exchange, the technologies that we use to do that, but also the kind of values and norms and the practices that take place within our social lives and our social worlds. So what we want to think about is how this kind of process works, if you like, how it's structured. So what we'll think about is there's two ways to argue how this works. One, there's a kind of an essentialist way of looking at this, and the other one is a kind of relationist or a relationship-based way of thinking about this. So the essentialist would probably see independent factors about our identity, like our age, our ethnic status, our class identity, those kind of factors, and they would see them as being stable and kind of fixed, and that there is, if you like, a true essence of ourselves, whereas a relationist-based approach sees these things as being fluid and something which they're contingent, so they're dependent on the here and now. It's an expression of the moment, if you like, rather than being something which is essential for all time, and that there is a mutual dependence, and we define our identity as it is negotiated and organised and related between each other in that relationship. So our job, I suppose, is to go beyond thinking that there is a true sense of identity and looking for ways in which we can help to support and build and develop a sense of community identity based on the circumstances that we're in now and where we want to be in the future, rather than thinking that there are fixed points in our past that we have to hold on to. So the big notion with this is idea that is associated with this is about the idea of social difference and personal difference and diversity of individuals. But what we want to try and avoid, I suppose, is a sense of social segregation, a sense that what we do is compartmentalise people so that they are fixed into, discrete silos, and that there is no intermixing, there is no integration of our sense of identity. So there is some evidence that the UK particularly has become more socially segregated in the last decade or two, and I think there's a lot of evidence around, and we've talked about this previously, about the divisions in terms of cultural identity between, say, Leicester and Leicestershire, which are very, very marked, and that our politics is increasingly, the politics of identity is something which kind of matters a lot, as where and how do you feel that you belong? And if you don't feel as if you belong, what are the factors that drive that disenchantment with the host culture, if you like? And if you do feel as if you belong, but you feel an anxiety that your host culture is under threat, what drives those kind of factors? So this is kind of certainly in the UK at the moment, this is a very kind of charged and politically fraught topic. So what we need to think about then is how do those identities come about? How do we form our identities? And how do we do that in practice rather than just thinking about it, if you like, theoretically? So because this is really important, because it defines the social policies that we enact. So about the idea of kind of inclusivity, about kind of what we can expect as forms of meaningful interaction between communities. It's often, I think it's the way our society is organised, it's divided, it's us and them, it's oil and water, it's black and white, almost literally, and people don't mix in the same way that they maybe should do, class-based divisions. So we've become a very kind of hierarchical, segregated society, and we don't have those kind of social justice principles of equal access and equal operation. We don't all share the same buses anymore. The division between car drivers and public transport users is very marked, and kind of tells us a lot about the kind of society that we are. So we mentioned this before as kind of where does our sense of belonging originate, and how do we enact a sense of belonging? Do we belong? What is our place within our community, within our culture, and what are the stories that help to inform our sense of belonging? And what we draw on a kind of set of ideas, a common stock of knowledge, and if that stock of knowledge is allowed to wither away, then does that create problems? Does that lead us into a position where we feel anxious about the future because we've got no past to draw back on? So we can look at kind of examples of where communities are widespread. There's an academic term that's used a lot, is kind of diaspora, which means the spread of people around the world who retain a strong sense of identity for a host culture. So a lot of communities settle in Leicester but retain a sense of belonging to the culture from which they originated. So India and Pakistan is predominantly strong, East Africa is strong in Leicester, and people retain, and you can see it in the streets as you walk around, a sense of the lineage, the legacy of that culture is something that they carry with them, because that's how they identify who they are in a changing world, in a changing environment, which puts forward a sense of modernity and consumerism as the main driving features of Western democracies, rather than a sense of belonging to a culture or a community. So I suppose we're looking at the idea of kind of what makes our common interests relevant, what gives us a sense of common understanding and a kind of sense of common identity. So we'll think about this in terms of some examples about how mainstream media is trying to address this, and how community media tries to address this, and what it represents in terms of what the barriers are, if you like, because this isn't an easy issue to deal with. And what the kind of the perceptions are of what our community identity is or might be. And to put this into a kind of context is, who's inside our community and who's outside? Who are the others that we might define ourselves against? It's an important kind of way of thinking about social identity, that you also define yourself not just within an in-group as people like us, but also in terms of, well, we're not like them, and then we're not the same as those other people are. So there's a kind of a split within our sense of social identity, which is kind of quite politically charged and quite present in European politics at the present time. The notes are up on the DMU Commons wiki, so go to wiki.our.dmu.ac.uk and search for the TECH1502 section, and you'll be able to download them in the Lecture 9 place. And otherwise, I'll see you at the lecture on Monday.